People from high society congregate in an underground arena to watch and bet on various monsters known as players as they battle to the death. One night, the ostensibly unintelligent creatures suddenly developed wills of their own, sparking a revolt that resulted in the deaths of all but 2 of the humans present. In the midst of the chaos, a doctor named Kenzaki flees with a newborn child. In the present, we see 2 couples walking while talking about the serial killer saga in town. Then a strange man walks past them and kills the man so quietly that no one notices. An elderly man on the outskirts stops his grandson from running out and hands him his toy. Jin is the main protagonist of the anime. He rejects the toy, but his grandfather insists that he keep it with him while out on patrol in the name of justice. Before he leaves, he's advised to avoid violence unless it is necessary for the sake of justice. Some thugs have cornered a lady in an alley, so Jin offers to assist her for 1,000 yen. Jin immediately attacks the thugs after she agrees. He easily dispatches one, infuriating the others. Jin's fighting style entails maneuvering on the walls in order to avoid being cornered. He had the group under control in no time. When his patrol mates Kuga and Konoha arrived, the party was over. The lady arrives to express her gratitude as Kuga scolds Jin, but Kuga refuses to let Jin take his reward from her. Later, the lady runs into Jin and hands him his 1,000 yen reward. He also gives him her business card and promises to treat him if he ever pays her a visit. Jin rushes home, only to discover dead bodies all around him. He locates his grandfather, who is nearing the end of his life. As a young child, he hasn't fully grasped the situation. He tries to apply saliva to the wounds in the hopes that it will heal them, but it does not work. Jin takes his grandfather's body to the doctors, but he is denied because he lacks sufficient funds. He calls Kuga because he has nowhere else to turn. Unfortunately, his father had recently discovered that he had been hanging out with a homeless boy, and he had been chastised for it. The maid brings Kuga's ringing phone forward, but when his father discovers it's from Jin, he disposes of the phone. Jin turns to the lady he helped earlier, and the 2 of them walk to a hospital. Later, she takes Jin in for the night because he has nowhere else to go. While they're taking a bath, Jin adds up all of the information and begins to cry because he will no longer be able to see his grandfather. They are attacked while walking to the store, and the lady, Akemi, is injured. All while attempting to protect Akemi, the serial killer reveals that he was the one who murdered his grandfather. Jin has been severely beaten, and when Akemi attempts to assist, she is blown away by the enemy's tump. The opponent transforms into his true monster form and moves to deliver the killing blow. Jin, however, catches him in his steps and knocks him down. Jin begins to emit a powerful aura that destroys everything in its path. As he moves to attack, he too transforms into a monster known as Charisma by the serial killer. He launches an attack, effectively ending the brief battle. He then reverts to his human form and collapses. A man named Hitani and a white-clad individual enter the scene. The clad and the visual tend to the defeated monster while ignoring Jin and Akemi, whom he misidentifies as humans. A grown-up Kano's attention is drawn to 2 men fighting during her usual humanitarian activities. She tries to separate them, but is easily pushed aside. The man appeared to be planning to continue the brawl even though she was on her way, but Jin appeared and communicated the situation. Kano recognizes Jin's ring and calls out to him, but their reunion is cut short by the man Jin works as their bodyguard. Jin meets Akemi in town, who is now struggling to survive due to the injuries sustained in the tragic battle. Kano attends Kook's event in the evening, where she meets her grandfather, whose presence greatly disorients her. Following the event, Kugu reveals that he intends to resume patrolling the street as they once did. When his friend's truck arrives, they begin their street patrol. Meanwhile, Jin is kidnapped by the Aragi family and forced to watch Akemi die at the hands of a monster. This causes him to transform into the monster known as Zet. While the men are watching, the monster pounces on Jin, who does not retaliate but simultaneously. He appears to take no damage at all. When he becomes serious, he kills the monster with a single blow, much to the surprise of his observers. He proceeds to smash the observation glass, but before he can confront the enemies, he hears Acme summon him. When he sees her, his body's transformation begins to deteriorate. The men reveal that Jin can only be turned back into a human by killing the monsters known as players. Jin discovers Acme has been transformed into a player, but all he wants is to resume his normal life with her. Just then, an employee shoots Acme and Jin witnesses her death for the second time. When he goes to confront the man, he reverts to human form because there are no more players alive. Kuga watches an anime at home that inspires his sense of justice. Konoha enters and expresses his displeasure with their father's actions. Konoha, on the other hand, reminds him that real life cannot be as perfect as an anime show. Mitsugaya Ragi, Kanwa's grandfather, approaches a sedated Jin and reveals his desire to rid the city of the players. When they arrive at the demolished underground facility, Mitsugaya explains that the rings on Jin's hand and the one above are known as the Rings of Exposure. He explains that as the facility's founders, they once used the ring to force players to regress into their monster form. Jin collapses unexpectedly during the conversation. As the larger ring resonates with his own, he begins screaming and in pain. Later, Mitsugaya explains that he and Kanzaki created him as a countermeasure to the monsters with whom they had previously battled. He then takes Jin to town, where he demonstrates to him that what he saw in the lab was all made up. When Jin attempts to leave, Mitsugaya instructs him to avoid contact with humans because it would endanger them. Jin agrees to become Zet and assist Mitsugaya in defeating the players in exchange for repairing Akenize's face and creating a likeness of her deceased child. A group of players melts a man into sand in an alley. When a girl catches them in the act, they decide to handle her. As she flees, one of the players pursues her. Meanwhile, Jin continues to work with Mitsugaya on experiments to bring his Zet factor to full capacity. Jin arrives at his house and begins to change. He discovers the lady who was being pursued earlier, hiding in his closet. He tries to chase her away, but she refuses, revealing that she just witnessed a man dissolve into sand. Jin eventually treats her to a home-cooked meal, which she enjoys. He detects the presence of a player and instructs her to remain behind while he goes outside. The girl emerges to find her bag on the floor, and shortly thereafter, the players from earlier approach her. Jin arrives on the scene and offers to assist her for 10,000 yen. When she accepts, one of his opponents approaches, and he knocks him down first. They spread a substance that erodes anything it comes into contact with while engaging the others. While they continue to fight, the men watching Jin shoot the lady who is being held hostage. Suddenly, one of the players reverts to his monster form. Before the battle even begins, the other two players abandon their brother, who violated the rules, by regressing. As a result, Jin begins battling the player in his human form. He is defeated by the monster, who has a powerful build-up. Jin is firmly grasped by the monster, who begins the process of melting him into sand. Jin, on the other hand, gains strength and pushes him back. He transforms into Zet and destroys the monster by ripping it apart. Mitsugaya notices that he isn't returning to his human form as expected, which is due to the fact that the player isn't dead. While hiding in its miniature form, the white-clad individual known as a sweeper discovers him and executes him, just as he does to all regressed players. The sweeper tries to kill Jin, but stops when Jin does not appear to be a human or a player. Hatani arrives and orders the sweeper to leave. When Jin asks if he is a player, he reveals that he and his species prefer the name Evol. The girl introduces herself as Hanoka the next day at Jin's house and begins arguing with Jin when he tells her she must leave the next day. Kuga is also taken to a secret facility where some of his father's aides have secretly constructed a superhuman suite to encourage his ambition. Kuga begins by pointing out the flaws of the suite, which is supposed to be identical to his anime hero, Alpha's. He objects to the color and wonders why there is no emblem on the head. He meets a man on his way home who refuses to identify himself. The man admits to being a fan of Kuga's and offers to work with him if he passes a test. He then shows him a video of Kana being drowned in a pool. He explains that Kuga must choose between saving his drowning sister and 3 strangers who are about to be killed. Kuga rushes to the school to ensure that his sister is safe as a result of his decision. 3 of his classmates are killed. Jin runs into Hanoka and her friend while walking with her. Hanoka notices the attraction between them and grabs Jin's arm. Jin motions for Kana to leave the premises and walks away. Jin senses the presence of a player as they walk away, so he leaves Hanoka behind. He rushes to discover that Kana has been kidnapped by a player who wishes to battle him. Kano defines herself, and her friend is well connected among her guards. While being shown the newly completed alphas, Kuga manages to call him for assistance before her phone is smashed by her kidnappers. Kuga quickly suits up and has nothing standing in his way of delivering justice to Kana. Meanwhile, Jin suffers the beating of his life due to his inability to transform into Zet. Shu, the player assigned to Kana, transforms in front of her, causing her to wet herself. Jin manages to land a fatal blow on the enemy player while his Zet factor slowly increases. Jin starts looking for Kana and quickly finds her in Tumomi. While rescuing the girls, Shu and his clones stab him from behind. The battle begins when he goes to confront them. However, Jin is once again outmatched. Kuga defeats the monster from above with a laser before he is killed. Kuga quickly assists Kana and Tumomi into his chopper, but he is informed that its capacity cannot accommodate everyone present. Kuga decides to stay behind, but they refuse because he is the Amagi family's heir. Hayami puts his decision-making skills to the test by asking him what he'll do if he has a rift that can save one person, but 3 people are drowning. If he decides to save all 3, they may perish. Kuga hesitates, but a small push from Jin strengthens his resolve, and he lets Tamami take his place on the chopper. While Jin is injured, he comes across the slump people for whom he used to advocate. They appear to be prepared to fight. They don't listen and instead confront the monsters. Kuga saves them before they're attacked. He buys them time to flee while he deals with shrimp monsters. Haitani believes Jin is useless, so he decides to teach him how to transform without taking damage first. He stabs him with a stake made from the exposed ring's remains, causing the ring to fuse with Jin. Jin begins to transform into Zet in a matter of seconds. He does not, however, stop at a white Zet. He will continue to evolve until he becomes a more powerful red Zet. Jin is taken aback by his new appearance and doesn't feel like he owns the body any longer. At the same time, Kuga are shooting at the head player. He becomes enraged and transforms into a full-fledged monster. Kuga switches weapons to a blade when it boasts about its tough form. Jin follows Shu as he attempts to flee. Shu begins regressing abruptly as a result of his resonance with Jin's ring. Jin engages Shu, and with each strike, he dominates him. Haitani appears to intercede before he finishes him off. He admits that he used Shu as a pawn to force Jin into his red form. This enrages Shu, but Jin already takes his life. He keeps squashing his offspring until no trace of him remains. Jin confronts Haitani, questioning his motivations, and he reveals the ring will not cause him to regress because he has a high level of evil. Jin attacks him, but he avoids his every move before fleeing the scene. Meanwhile, Kuga is being attacked by the player in his battle. When he learns that Kano is safe, his will to fight is completely restored. Jin interrupts the player's attack with a hit from behind. The 2 friends band together to take on the player who has amassed an army of hatchlings. They fight the hatchlings together and eventually corner the player in a 2 versus 1 battle. Jin's body, however, abruptly stops moving, allowing the hatchlings to rejoin the fight. The stake on his chest snaps, causing his red transformation to unravel. He informs the player that he is being used by Haitani, but he is unconcerned as long as he can kill. Kuga then grabs him from behind, allowing Jin to reclaim his sword. The new partner is corporate, and while Kuga keeps the hatchlings at bay, Jin dispatches the player without pause. Haitani later meets with the Evol's boss. Despite being chastised for interfering in the affairs of other players, Haitani shifts the conversation when he mentions Zet. After hearing the entire story behind the players in Jin's form, Kuga meets up with Jin at the hospital. He is so taken with a Zet that he gives Jin the hero name Zetman. Jin learns that Kanzaki is still alive at the lab. They force Jin to question him about the proper method for achieving the Red Zet transformation, but Jin only wants to see his grandfather. They arrive at the location where Kanzaki is being held, and when the door is opened, Jin is astounded by his terrible condition. Kanzaki's brain was revived in order to obtain information from it, but it became conscious and developed its own will. As a result, he is kept in a state of preservation. Kanzaki reveals that the red stone is the key to his transformation. Jin disconnects his life support system so he can rest in peace. Haitani sends his spy into the Eriji mansion to obtain the red stone pendant. The spy enters Kano's room, looking exactly like Jin. A helicopter arrives in front of the house just as she hands it to him. Jin and company rush into the house, revealing the presence of two of Jin's clones. Kuga moves quickly to check on Kano, but he is attacked. When he is pursued while Jin assists, the other clone targets Mitsugai, but his scientist saves him with the blade. Jin arrives just in time to save him. It quickly becomes a two-way fight, but one of the clones begins to deteriorate. Outside, the enemy had successfully obtained the pendant, causing the bomb-rigged mansion to explode. Jin later runs into the town's boss. He reveals that he was the first to turn on the humans. Jin becomes hostile, but Sweeper arrives to control him. The boss explains that Heitanai is both a human and an EVL's enemy. While the majority of EVLs want to coexist, Haitani wants to destroy humans, so he asks Jin to help and care for him. Jin returns home to find Hanoka expecting him. She begs him to let her stay because she feels safe only with him. Jin then swears to protect her no matter what. Kuga meets Jiru after learning that his sister has been kidnapped. Kuga is dropped when he inquires about Kano's whereabouts in the car. He awakens in an unfamiliar room with Jiru speaking through an implanted earpiece. Jiru reveals that his test is about to begin and mocks him for being easily duped and kidnapped, despite playing the hero. Kuga moves around with his guard up until he finds himself in a room full of his schoolmates who are also fans of his. Jiru explains that he has two options: find him and save his sister, or prioritize the student's safety. This causes him to become anxious, and when a rude girl approaches him for his autograph, he begs to use the restroom. When he returns, he meets a girl who claims she found the building suspicious and wishes to flee with him. She presses against the wall, revealing a secret room where the girls are. Kuga sends the girl off to find her own way while he joins the other girls in the hall. When a student jumps on the bed, she informs Kuga that he made the wrong decision, and she is crushed to death on the bed. Everyone is shocked, and he is even blamed for her death. Despite Kuga's disapproval, the students flood into the passageway and become trapped as a result. Jiru summons Hammerman and reveals that there's an elevator that will transport Kuga to him, but he must abandon the girls. Kuga refuses and moves to defeat the robot so that he can progress with everyone else. Hatoni abruptly cuts off the town's broadcast and takes over. He reveals the existence of Evo elsewhere in their history. Just then, everyone else in town began to regress. They go on a killing spree, slaughtering any human they come across. Kuga is still facing Hammerhead while being pushed to his limits. Jin, as a white Zetman, joins the fight to save the humans in town. Despite his injuries, Kuga is ecstatic about the battle. When he loses his sword, he jumps and transforms it into a gun, which he fires at point-blank range on the player. Following the battle, the girls label him a murderer and refuse to have anything to do with him. They all rush toward the elevator when it is revealed, but lasers shoot out of the wall and kill them all. While he is in despair, the last surviving student gives him hope. She is forced to tell Kuga that she found Kana, but he is unaware. She leads him to Jiru's location, where she distracts and disarms him of his weapon. Jiru introduces Kuga to his son, Ikaru, and they both start lecturing him about his motivation for justice. Jiru nails it when he says that Kuga seeks justice as an excuse to engage in violence. Jiru begins to transform, revealing Ikaru's true monster form. They claim to be humans who gained player abilities following the incident at the underground arena. Just then, Kuga's friend Hayami reveals himself to be a player's accomplice. He forces Kuga to attend a live press conference during which his father denies creating the players. His colleague, who works for Hayami on the other hand, reveals the brutal truth to the public with evidence. While Jiru wishes for Kuga's death, Hayami wishes for him to be a hero and kill his father. This anger is his, so he reclaims his weapon. Jiru attacks Hayami, Enzikuru, and Jiru before they can use their buck to control him. Hayami and the other evil arrive at the press conference, but President Amaji is prepared. His plans, however, fall short because they are too powerful for mere humans to handle. Jiru arrives on the scene to deal with Haitani, but he is severely bodied by him. He pierces Jin through the heart, undoing his transformation. Haitani reveals that he has turned the red stone into a stake in order to force Jin to become a proper player. Kuga shows up in his alpha suite to stop him. Kuga's father orders him to kill Jin, but he refuses and instead turns his gun on him. He pulls his trigger, striking his mother, who had stepped in to protect her husband. Haitani then unleashes an army of players in the room and begins mass slaughtering everyone in the room. Kuga initially defends civilians against the players, but after a while, Kano's arrival brings the action to a halt. By revealing Hanko as a hostage, Kaitani coerces Jin into stabbing himself. Regardless of Kuga's objections, he stabs himself and transforms into the Red Zetman. His ring of exposure causes all players to revert to their true form, including Haitani and Hanoko. Hanocho transforms into a massive four-legged monster, revealing himself to be the player who turns everything to sand. While thinking about his master plan, Jin dashes at Haitani but is pushed back by his halos, while Hanoko continues to move uncontrollably and unintentionally turns humans to sand. Jin manages to sneak up on Haitani and stab him, but Kuga moves to take Hanocho down. He slashes her into two wild Jins, eventually driving him insane. While Kana and the detective look on, Kuga engages Haitani in a futile battle. Haitani's attack damages Kuga's suite, causing him to fall. He is advised to stop fighting, but Kuga refuses. Haitani pins him down and offers to let Jin finish him off. Jin, on the other hand, turns his attack on Haitani and stabs him. Kuga turns his blade on Jin, declaring that he must kill him to prevent players from regressing. When the time comes to pull the trigger, he hesitates, but does so while the sun is rising. Jin stops him and transforms into a more powerful version of Zet known as Charisma. He overcomes his killer instinct and flees the scene. Years later, Kuga is still defending innocent people from regressive player attacks. At the same time, Jin, in his Red Zet form, does the same thing unnoticed by the public. And that's where the anime Zetman ends. Thanks for watching.